This week on the 77% Street Debate.
Since I left my parents in the bush, I never set eyes on them anymore. And it was really tough for me because I was crawling with my hands and my knees.
Where is the rehabilitation that happened? Where is the psychological therapy that happened?
Nobody talk about it. Not in school, not in college. We pretend like it didn't happen.
Hello and welcome to the 77%, the show for Africa's youth. This week, we are in the West African country of Sierra Leone. And 20 years ago this year, an 11-year brutal civil war came to an end. Unfortunately, some of the people who participated in that war lost their loved ones and even lost some of their limbs were children. 20 years on, those children now make up part of the 77%, and we want to find out from them, what does the world look like for them? What are their hopes and aspirations? Now, before we continue, I'd like to warn you that some of the themes we might touch on might be difficult for some of you to hear, so please approach cautiously. So we'll begin with Ibrahim, who is a teacher here in Sierra Leone, but obviously 20 years ago, this was not the case. So can you explain to me what your experience was during that very difficult time?
During that time, I was staying with my uncle, so rather than unfortunate, I was forced to join part of the commercial. But rather than unfortunate, my father too was lost in that particular time, so I decided to be part of the commercial group due to that factor. So I also joined and partake in the civil war during that time.
All right, so let me just get you straight again. Yeah. So your father died during the first days of the war, the first few years of the war, and then your uncle recruits you to join the Kamajo, who are like the community sort of militia. Yeah. All right, let's come to Mohammed here. And your situation is not so different from what Ibrahim is describing. Tell our viewers what you went through.
I was 15 years of age when the rebel attacked in our township. And we went to the bush for 3 months. Then there was nothing to eat with my father and mother. So we are in the bush, so nothing to eat. So my parents asked me to go out and get some fruit, like papaya, some mangoes during that time. So on my way going, I stepped my feet on the landmines. So automatically chopped my leg. Yeah. So I was in the bush for 3 good days. I found myself in a thatched house where I met 2 people. So those people took me to a place called Yile, and where I met with the Action Farm. So they took me to Go Government Hospital.
Wow, so I mean, that's really, really tough. How do you survive in the bush for 3 days with an amputated leg?
Well, it's a really terrible moment for me, and whenever I explain that one, I always felt difficult in my emotion, and because since I left my parents in the bush, I never set eyes on them anymore because they died on hunger in the bush. So since that time, I never set eyes on them, and it was really tough for me because I was crawling with my hands and my knees for 3 good days.
Yeah, I'm really, really sorry to hear about that. Unfortunately, it's more terrible news, and we're just going to come to you for a second, Fantasy Wiz, because what they're describing is not alien to you either, having been alive and also a teenager at that time.
No, it wasn't actually. For the fact that I think it was in 1998, I was a child, and then the rebels attacked in Kabbalah, and then everyone, everyone was scattered. Mothers were not looking for their children, and children were unable to look for their mothers, and whatever, everyone is like all over the place. We went into the bush. We were there for 5 days, I think. I got to see my mother, and then my mother was like, "You have to go back and get medication." And then I went there and I saw a family friend, which was like close family friend. He used to live in our house. And I went there, and there was no way to go back to my mother. And then he was like, "You're safe with me. You could, spend the night." People were not like in town. It's just little people. And then that was the night that I got raped by him. Not once, but twice, 3 times, I think. And I was there, helpless. I could do nothing about it. Like, who am I going to tell? He was the only person. And then the next morning, he pretended like nothing happened. And then he asked me, "Are you okay?" And I remember, I didn't say anything. And I didn't say anything about it for like 10 years because I couldn't. I'm like, who would believe me? And then my trust went from 100 to 0. I trust no one.
To this day?
Yes, unfortunately, yes. I'd have to say that I don't.
Wow, thank you for sharing that.
okay.
Yeah, so let's come to Ishmael. You know, I'm listening to some of these stories, and of course, I have a little bit of background having spoken to some of you, to all of you actually, before this debate. But as I'm hearing it again, it's difficult for me. I can't imagine what it's like for you to carry that with you for the rest of your life. Please explain to us what happened with you and how you found yourself to be here today, alive and well, and a survivor.
So when I was about 12 years old, the war came into my life. I started running from it. By the time I was 13, I'd been recruited to fight in the government army. And I fought for nearly 3 years, lost everything, my home, my aspirations. I wanted to be an economist. That didn't happen. Long and short of it, I was able to survive the war, and I was put in a rehabilitation center actually here in Freetown, in the eastern part, in a place called Approved School. Went through rehabilitation, and then I was adopted in a family in the United States, so I left. But I carried the burden of the war with me because I felt guilt for having survived, and additionally for having not only survived, but having the opportunity to live and study. So I decided to write about it. So my first book, which is A Long Way Gone, chronicled something that most people did not hear about prior to that. And so I wanted to change that. So I changed language by actually making one thing very clear, that all of these stories that I've heard, to survive war requires intelligence. It was not looked upon that way.
Can you explain that to me?
Well, imagine a child who's 12, 13, 8, every day having to wake up and decide which way to run because there's violence in their country. Everything has collapsed. That child becomes an economist, an anthropologist, a painter, a singer. They imagine what's possible, what's not. Basically, it's the epitome of resilience, true nature of it. So, and in addition to that, if you're a child who was drawn into war to fight as a soldier, what child do you know at an age of 13 can command 500 other kids at a playground, let alone ones carrying weapons? So, but when people look at black children, particularly on African continent in war, they don't see the intelligence that it takes to survive these things.
Yeah. And by the way, Ishmael's case and everybody else we've heard from today, their cases are one of tens of, it's estimated that around 10,000 children participated in that war. And the children we're talking about are probably not older than the ones who are playing football here. So that gives us a visual, but also very difficult to imagine. Let me invite John to this conversation because you're obviously working with young people in the community, most of whom have these experiences as their childhood. What do you think is the biggest challenge or the biggest thing that people are still carrying with them from the war?
One of the biggest things is to have a conversation at a community level. Most of the present young generation did not experience the war. And for those who experience the war, they don't have the space to have that dialogue. So I think part of our challenge as a nation is having an ongoing conversation about what went wrong. We used to be one big family. Your child is my child. Your mother is my mother. What went wrong for us to hurt our children that we were supposed to protect? But having that conversation seems to be a big challenge, and that is why we as Family Talk, we continue to create that space at the community level within the school clubs for them to continue with this conversation, this dialogue about what went wrong, so that they will be able to serve as role models to avoid that scenario in the future.
Okay, it's interesting to me that you say there's no space for dialogue, yet externally, when people think about Sierra Leone, I think the civil war is one of the things that comes to mind. Why do you think the discussion is not happening internally?
Well, we need the conducive atmosphere to have that conversation. We started as an organization. We were able to organize 215 bonfires. That is at the community level, where we work with section chiefs, the traditional leaders, to come together to understand what went wrong. Why did you kill someone else's mother? Why did you kill the daughter that you were supposed to protect? So having that conversation, the space to have that conversation was only created at the bonfire, where you can tell your paramount chief that what you did during the war was wrong. And then the paramount chief will apologize. Some traditional chiefs also apologize. But outside of that space, it's a taboo.
But you did mention people who didn't experience the war directly, and one of those people is Mariam. So you were one when the war ended. But your parents, obviously, who've raised you and who gave birth to you, were very much part of this crisis. Is this something that you discuss at home openly? Has it affected how you were raised?
Just like Ishmael and everyone here, my parents were able to strive through the war and they were able to go to school and get education. But what I can say is it has affected a lot of family members that I know directly. And what we experience is the trauma of war. What happens is if you are around people who have actually experienced trauma of war, then that trauma can affect you because you have relations with them. So you would experience that a lot of family members were not able to get jobs, they were not able to learn skills because their formative years were destroyed by the war. So all the burden, all the for them to have support and all the responsibilities lies with your parents, lies with your father, who is the only surviving member or who is the only educated one.
Wow. Okay, so let me come back to fantasy here, because we're hearing that on the one hand, not only do the opportunities and the spaces to speak openly, they don't exist, but not speaking about it creates more trauma even for the generations after the fact.
Yeah. One thing we're good at in Sierra Leone is we move too fast. When something happens today, everyone is all over it. It's a frenzy. And then tomorrow, we moved on to something else. And we pretend like what happened yesterday didn't happen. And that's how you have people like me and a lot of other people that are bottling up. So I went through phases. There was a time I become like so paranoid, like any sound, I would just like, I went into like, I would just black out.
Yeah.
And then it got to a point I get cold.
You mean like internally you feel nothing?
Like nothing.
Yeah.
Like I could see they're doing this to people, they're doing that to people. It doesn't affect me in one bit. I get colds like ice. And then after that, and then I went into call it PTSD or whatever, and that's where I am now.
Yeah.
The sight of blood, it like, if I see blood, like just in whatever, I just go into this thing that I don't know how to take. Like my body is shaking. I feel like I want to throw up. I feel like I want to poop. I feel like so me, if I hear like I'm inside and I hear people shouting, for example, or it's Christmas time and I hear they have all this, the spark, the whatever it is. If I hear that sound, I can't stand. I could just like find somewhere to sit and I'm just panicking.
Ishmael, let me come to you, because you said that earlier you felt this sense of guilt for not just having escaped the war, but also having left the country to rebuild your life. Did you get a chance to get sort of mental health care after the fact?
Yes, I did have a little bit of mental psychosocial therapy, as they used to call it, right after the war. That was not the case for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And even after I left, I went to the United States, where I went to school. I did not get support. What people call now PTSD is a new language that didn't exist at the time that some of us came out of the war. You just were some person who was seeing things, who was losing it at some times. As Fantasy said, some sounds scared you. You didn't want to look at certain places. You didn't sleep well. There was no discussion, really. There was shame around having that. Now, what I also want to really address is the fact that if you look at our society, Sierra Leone now, you will see how people behave in this culture, in this society, reflects what we haven't dealt with. A lot of us are broken.
Can you give me some of those examples?
Well, think about social, personal spaces, the way people view women, the way people view relationships. All of those things had dysfunctionalities had existed during the war, and some of the people who inherited that went on to be parents and raise children. They don't know how to pass on those things to them.
Yeah.
So when you walk around the city, you will see people who are angry for reasons they can't even explain. You will see people who are walking, daydreaming, because we have not had the space to discuss what really happened so that we can repair each other.
Okay, let me come back to John, because somebody from government might be watching this and say, hey, we did our job. We formed this commission. There was a special court. There are people who were prosecuted. What more can we do?
They did their bit by ticking the box. This outside in thing. They said at the end of the war, peace agreement, there should be a truth commission, tick. There should be prosecution, tick. But did the truth commission really address the root causes of the war? I will tell you the truth commission, the report is one of the best we have, if not the best report we have as a nation. But the process was flawed. All what you've had occurred at the community level. My suggestion to the experts, the consultant, was let us look at the possibility of organizing mini commissions where people at the community level will speak within the safety of their community about what went wrong and how can they as a community, as a family, move forward. But they said it has never happened before. Then they choose to have the official Truth Commission like in South Africa. So basically the Truth Commission, yes, it existed, but the process was flawed, alongside the challenge of having a special court running alongside the Truth Commission.
By the way, I should interrupt briefly to just say that only 9 people were actually convicted for crimes committed during this time.
Correct, yes. Yeah. So basically, and the cost, the price tag to prosecuting that 9 is about $300 million.
Okay, so earlier Fantasy said that this is a society filled with broken people, and now you're saying it's also people who did not really get justice. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
And my experience in this country is justice is best defined by the individuals themselves. When we work in communities, to them justice is when the person who did wrong to them comes forward in the public for a public apology in the presence of everyone. That is justice. But when you look at the special court, the 9 or 10 that were prosecuted, they were in almost like hotel. But make no mistake in terms of the importance of it. Yes, it sends a message to Africa heads of state in terms of Charles Taylor. But for us as a nation, justice can better be served if we're allowed to define it.
Yeah. I want to hear from Mohammed a little bit, because I know that the stigma, we're talking about the stigma from the war, survivors, women. Tell me about that.
There was one question the TRC went and asked people, they should forgive, then at the end of the day, forget. It is mess, yeah? I can never forget my amputation. Never and ever, even my child, when she or he comes, I would tell him or her that I became amputated during the 10 years, the 11 years, senseless, brutal rebel war. So he can't ask me to forget. And some of the main reasons that we formed the amputee football team throughout the country in Bo, Kenneman, McKinney, just to ease our stress. Whenever we met together, we don't think about our problem.
Yeah. Ibrahim, I read somewhere something that was very shocking to me, that this country only has 3 psychiatrists. So if this is a situation, how have you been assisted to sort of get away from this thinking and live your life in a more productive and healthy way?
Well, like for instance, because the president also created venue for some of us that have been part of the war, for us to be able to elevate ourselves through by education. Because as I'm standing here, as I'm one of the beneficiaries, because I went through the hurdles, for me to be able to upgrade myself.
You also had something to tell me about this whole mental health issue. Tell me about it.
It's the word mental health. And then in Creole, it means say cresposin. And when they say cresposin, that means that person is crazy. That not like, when you say, oh my God, you're so crazy. No, you're crazy. That's a mad person. That's a mental person. So if I say, oh my God, like I come up today, go on social media saying, I'm struggling with mental health, because personally I deal with anxiety. I've been dealing with that for like a very long time. And then they start looking at you like don't go close to her. She's this, she's that, she's that.
Yeah. I want to hear from Mariam if the education system is also catering to this. As somebody who says you're facing second generational trauma, is it something that you're taught in school? Are you addressing this in your own sort of youth circle?
As mental health issues right now, a lot of people, even youth as my age, do frown around mental health discussions, trauma, depression, anxiety. They don't want to talk about it. And even I have spoken to some of my colleagues who are studying medicine in Sierra Leone College of Medicine. They will tell you that I don't want to study psychology or be a psychiatrist, because everybody in my community will feel I'm a mad person. I'm working with mad people. And what they fail to realize is mental health issues does not only claim to people that are mad. I can be talking to you, I can be saying physically, but mentally I'm sick.
So let me ask a question that, it might even sound callous to ask it, but I need to. Have Sierra Leoneans really learnt from the war?
No. No.
No?
No. When I say
you say no.
when I
Everybody
say-
says no.
Everybody say
Wow,
no.
wow.
Listen, I know what I'm saying. I work with young people, mostly young people, and adolescent girls, boys, whatever. Have we learned anything from the war? No. You know why? Because we pretend like it didn't happen. Nobody talk about it. Not in school, not in college, not in houses, not in there. It didn't happen. Sometimes what I do to people that are adolescent boys and girls that I work with, I play, in as much as it's crazy, I shouldn't, but I play documentaries of the war. And sometimes they go like, is that Rambo? I said, no. You see that part? It's State House. You see that part? I start showing them. And then the look on their faces is like, it's to die for. Like, they go like, and then sometimes they look at me like, Auntie Fantasy, you were there during that time? And I was like, yes. So if we don't stop or we don't do it right, we don't try to fix things, we might go back to this. And then they go like, no, we shouldn't. I was like, no.
Yeah.
That's the point. That's what we have to do as a country. That's what we have to do as a nation. Go back. Forgive and forget for who? The forget, pull it, like remove it. Forgive. Yeah.
But
Forget.
talk about it first.
Forget? No, let's talk about
All
it.
right.
And let me know why I'm forgiving.
Mariam, this is very scary for you who, didn't go through it and you can still see. What makes you say we haven't learned as a nation?
All the situations around the war, all the effects, all the things that led to the war are still present, are still here. Corruption is here. Youth unemployment is here. Poverty is here. And even the fact that we don't talk about it makes it more scary, because if we don't talk about it, how do we want to move past it? For example, the DDR process that happened, the disarmament process that happened after the war, I've learned in school that actually the people didn't go to the camps. The soldiers, the children who were part of the war, who became armed soldiers, they didn't actually go to the camp. All they wanted was the money that was coming from the DDR process.
Yeah.
Give me your arms, I give you incentives, and you sit back home. So where is the rehabilitation that happened? Where is the psychological therapy that happened? It didn't happen. And those people are adults today. They are Okada riders today. They are in the communities. And when situations happen around elections, don't forget, the whole thing that happened in Sierra Leone was around the political situation.
power, yeah.
And so when issues like that arise again, you see these people taking up arms. That's what they're used to.
Yeah, by the way, it's important to note that this country is relatively stable, but when there's elections, there tends to be violent flare-ups. So, John, how do we move forward from a situation like this?
Yeah, what we need is a constructive engagement of young people. Let's try to include in the curriculum of schools the history of the war. Let's try
Is it not part of the curriculum?
No, it's not.
Oh, my goodness.
It's not taught in schools. Let's have that conversation in the schools, at the university, so that people get to understand what went wrong.
All right.
If I could add something to that. There is an adage in Sierra Leone. It's very, very popular. Like, there's not a day that goes by without you hearing someone saying it. If you don't know usa you come out, you're not going to know usa you they go.
What does that mean?
If you don't know where you're coming from, you will not know where you're going. Let's know where we've been. What's there? What's behind us? Let's study, let's read that. And then we'll know how to go forward. If not, we'll go back to that.
Yeah. Going forward, what do you think this country needs to do in order to be sustainable, to be a healthy place for people like you and maybe your children in the future?
Okay, so first of all, I think what we need to do is that people that are coming to us, like the NGOs, they come to us, this is your problem, this is how you fix it, without asking us. They assume they know our problems and they know how to fix it. That should stop. We should tell them our problems.
Yeah.
And we know our problems and we know how to fix them.
Yeah.
That's what we should do as a country.
I think that's a fantastic place to end. It's very rare that on these street debates we dwell on the past, but if there's something that has come out very, very clearly today, is that in some instances, in order to move forward, as Fantasy said very clearly, you sometimes have to look back. Thank you for watching.